The education sector, so much being said about it, not just about the mass failure in WAEC. Now you also heard that ASU may embark, they say they will embark on another strike on Monday, a 1 week warning one. So it's a whole gamut, a whole picture actually. And so what exactly is going on there? Well, we're joined this morning by Professor of Counseling in Psychology from University of Lagos, Professor Ngozi Osareren. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we just are faced with this again. Sadly, it always has to come to some sort of almost a deadlock before anyone begins to look into it and act. But from what you've seen going on, I know that this cannot definitely be the best of times, but is it that government has consistently neglected this sector, or there's something that maybe ASU or the education committees or agencies always put forward that doesn't seem acceptable to government, and then there have to be this deadlock?
That is interesting. I don't want us to see it from the hard point you are taking. Not that government has consistently neglected education. Education, incidentally, turns out to be the weeping child, because education is the only place that everybody claims to be an expert. And because everybody claims to be an expert in education, that is why we are always running into problems. So when the people who know what should be done in the sector are talking, their voices are not loud enough because they are not, in quotes, from the right side of town. So it's not a consistent negligence, because some smattering changes had been done. There are policies. We have very good policies, very, very good policies. But the problem is implementation.
Has it always been like this?
It is, you know, when you have your priorities and you focus on your priorities. Our priority, I think, shifted from those life-enduring values that many of us had when we were growing up to now focus on material wealth, material wealth, material wealth. How do I get money? The more I get, the more bloated my ego becomes, and the tiny little things that matter don't matter anymore. That is the basic foundation of where we have found ourselves in.
You know, listening to you now, it looks like we've always known that there is some kind of problem, and you talk about implementation. For instance, well, you were once Commissioner for Education in Edo State. It means that we had experts in some places, if not all of the time at least, to oversee that particular sector of our national life. How can we drive the implementation of all of these that you have just highlighted, if we say it's been some kind of...
Driving needs honesty.
Because now we're getting to see
honesty,
results, terrible results.
Terrible results. You cannot have... You can't cook... Put beans in your pot to cook, and when it's done, you sit down waiting to eat yam. That is simply not possible. It's simply not possible. It's not just going to work. Implementation, because we have to be honest. Leadership, when you have leadership that is willing and ready and honest to face the rot. You know, not playing the ostrich. It's not enough for you to play the ostrich. For you to say that, I want to do this, but your body language is saying a different thing. There has to be a congruence between what you are saying and what you are doing.
But what is it that goes wrong? Because there are those who would understand it if those who run maybe in politics are not from the sector. But you had people who are from the sector, the ivory towers, become commissioners, ministers of education. And it's at that time that it looks as if you even have much more problems than the education sector has ever had. What goes on there?
You are putting me on the spot, and you know, we have to be circumspect in some of the things we say. When you put people, maybe from, yes, they are from the ivory tower, are they in education?
Oh, two different
that
things.
is, yes, that is what I'm telling you. Education is not just going to school. It goes far beyond going to school.
Just like schooling and education.
Exactly. You are in the ivory tower. You are a lecturer, you are a professor in the university. You are not in the faculty of education. There's a world of difference.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Of course it makes a lot of difference.
So what's the difference?
The difference is that, you know, in education, you teach how to teach and how to manage teaching process. The management of the whole process. A professor of chemical engineering may not have heard or seen the national policy on education. And you make him a minister of education. And when he gets to the ministry, he will be at the behest of the ministry officials who have their own agenda. Unless these policies are brought to his purview, he will not be able to do anything.
It takes us back to the National Assembly because leading up to all of this, before we saw the mass failure recorded by students in the last West African Examination Council, they said that, well, they should declare a state of emergency in the education sector. And now with all of this analysis, it brings us back to, well, when people come before them and we have to ask questions as to what ministry you go back in, should we now say maybe some specific ministries like education for us to really get it right and straight? Whoever is going to man that ministry should be told from day one that this man has this portfolio attached to his name, so that they know what kind of questions to even ask him, so that we don't start to talk about revamping the education sector a couple of years from now.
That is only for the president to answer. Declaring state of emergency in education is not the issue. You may declare a state of emergency and you bring out funds. How are the funds managed? How are the funds? You see, maybe when you finish, go back, check the budget. How lopsided the budget is on education. Because some of us are insisting that the money allocated to education should be more for investment in education. Most times the money is on personnel costs.
How do you mean investment?
Investment, the teacher that is going to teach your children, when was the last time he or she had any refresher course? The teacher that is teaching your children, does he or she have the necessary materials, instructional materials that will aid the teaching process?
So we take these things for granted.
Those are the things. You can't, I've told you, you can't put beans on fire and expect to see yam at the end of the day. Mass failure is not a day affair. It's a cumulative thing. How is the foundation? How is our basic education? And when we say that there's mass failure in whose context? Because we are looking at 5 credits in English and maths. But some of the people that are not captured within these 5 credits, including English and maths, may well have had 7 credits, including English and no maths.
Okay.
Or 7 credits, including maths and no English. But we have pigeonholed them as part of the failure. And depending on the course that particular individual wants to study. It's not every university that insists on credit in English and maths.